Welcome to Beyond Four Walls. Each week, we sit down with leaders, creators, and change makers to uncover the moments, pivots, and lessons that shape their success in business and life.
Today on Beyond Four Walls, we are joined by Nat Harrison, founder of SOAR, a movement studio and community rooted in mindfulness, embodied practice, and emotional well-being. Located in the West End, it's where I frequently attend classes along with many others in Etobicoke. But Nat's path is anything but linear, spanning from corporate marketing, entrepreneurship, authorship, and her work as a qualifying psychotherapist. Through SOAR, she's created a space that invites people to move the body, shift the mind, and access the heart. We're diving into her origin story today, her philosophy on movement and healing, and what it really takes to build a purpose-led brand from the inside out. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. An absolute pleasure.
So before we dive into your origin story, I just want to go back a million years to when I first met you. Now, you probably don't remember, nor should you. There's no reason for you to, but I was a lowly copywriting intern at a advertising agency called Blast Radius, which probably doesn't even exist anymore. It was on Bloor Street in the Holtz building where their offices are. And I fortunately got to sit in on a lot of client meetings. And one of the clients at that time was Nike Canada. And I remember you were in those meetings. And so, yeah, you've had quite a shift because you were client side in a corporate marketing environment. And now here you are as founder of SOAR. Tell me about your career and that transition.
I actually remember those years very fondly. We did some pretty incredible work together. Working for Nike Canada was probably like one of my most creative outlets ever. And I am so grateful for that kind of season of my life. And I would say, like, you said origin story, and it makes me want to, go to the beginning.
Yeah,
if that's okay.
Please.
So I moved from New Brunswick to Toronto.
Oh, okay.
East Coaster by heart.
Yeah.
I was coming to Toronto for first-year university, and I had a very wonderful first couple of months.
At U of T?
At Ryerson, formerly Ryerson, Metropolitan now. But I was on the varsity soccer team. I was studying business. Everything was just so typical for a standard 18-year-old. And then within a few months, I had what I call a nervous breakdown. My mom had to fly from New Brunswick, rent a hotel room, pull me out. I was not sleeping. I was not eating. I had stopped going to class, and I was in debilitating anxiety and panic attacks. And I had no idea why. And so my mom ordered all this blood work. She took me to all these specialists she couldn't understand. And most of the doctors were saying, stress, new life at school, she can't handle it. Here's a, prescription. And I am all for medicine. I actually think it plays a vital role in our well-being and our mental health. And I was willing to do anything at that point. I was so desperate. I thought I would have to be admitted to a hospital. I was that far gone in terms of being able to take care of myself. And my mom was really persistent. And she said, you know what? That is an avenue worth exploring, but not yet. There's something not right with my daughter. And one evening, I ended up telling her that I'd recently gone on the birth control. I mean, what 17, 18-year-old wants to tell their mom they're on the birth control? I mean, some.
Yeah.
Not me. And she remembered a time in her life where she had gone on the birth control and had a very similar reaction. So, at that point, I went off it. We worked with a nutritionist to get my diet back in place. We worked with, my coach to make sure that my movement was supporting my well-being versus being just pressure related. We worked with a guidance counselor and a mental health provider to make sure that I was seeking the right type of talk therapy and tools and support. And slowly, not overnight, but slowly I started getting better. I was able to go back and stay in the dorm. I was able to go back and start taking classes again. And before you knew it, I was still really tender, but I was myself again. And so it was the first time in my life, because I'd always been an anxious child. Mental health had been at the forefront, of my existence, but I didn't quite understand it from the very beginning. But for the first time, I started to realize that there were these levers in my life that were really important that I pull in order to feel good. And if I didn't pull them, like nutrition and movement and talk therapy and mindfulness, if I weren't pulling them, then I was falling apart. And so it was there that kind of started this fascination with mental health and well-being. And I feel like as awful as it was, as disruptive as it was, I feel like it gave me a chance at a really young age to really focus on what's necessary to feel good. And so from there, the trajectory was I went into an agency life for a bit, and then I went client side and I worked for Pepsi for a bit, and that was phenomenal. I worked on brands and marketing like Gatorade and Pepsi, very sales-oriented, but also some really cool marketing learnings. Then I went into Nike Canada, which was, as you know, the creative standards are off the charts. So I learned this beautiful kind of world around creativity and how to market your story and how to talk about your story. And while I was at Nike, I would say, if anybody asked me, I'd say, this is my dream job. Like, I've landed my dream job. And then I had kids. And, I didn't want to believe that kids change a lot, but they really do. And so with Nike, I was flying to Portland and New York, and there was this always-on work culture that, was great in my 20s and I really thrived in. But as I entered my 30s and I had 2 kids under the age of 2, it didn't feel as accessible for me. So I made the really difficult decision to leave Nike. And so my thought was, I'm going to take 2 years and I'm just going to focus on raising my family. And that's going to be okay. That's going to be enough. And within 2 months, boy, oh boy, did I learn that it wasn't enough and that I needed more. And so, it wasn't that staying home with my children wasn't fulfilling. That was. But I still had this deep desire to do more, as well as spend quality, important time with them.
So was it in that moment that the idea of SOAR came to be, or how did we go from there?
Well, I had this, being a stay-at-home mom, there isn't a lot of time, but there are naps and there are, your kids playing at the park and you're kind of just sitting there watching or playing with them. But I just had this space open up, this space that wasn't available to me when I was working full-time. Being a mom full-time was demanding, but there was this new space that I got really curious about. And in that space, I started thinking, why does movement make me feel so good? Why does nutrition, allow me to access this new balance? Why does talk therapy, help me gain new perspectives that don't feel as anxiety-inducing? Everything that I had learned up until that point, it helped me manage my anxiety. It wasn't quite helping me thrive yet. So I got really curious of what could I do through movement? What could I do through nutrition? What could I do through therapy that could, just really help me feel my best? I wanted to do better. And so I went and got a certification in Barre. I really just thought, okay, I can go and I can learn more about movement. And so by doing that certification, it required an exam. And so that exam, I needed to practice teach. And so I literally invited neighbors into my backyard. And every Thursday night at 7, anyone who wanted to join me for free was welcome to join me. And I would just practice my Barre moves, practice, high-intensity interval training. I was also doing that certification. And so I really just got curious about, moving the body to feel good. And I think why that was so important to me is because when I went and worked out for my mental health, what I was getting at a lot of gyms and a lot of studios was, and it's not wrong, but there was this push to work out to look good. So there was talk about calorie counting. There was talking about beach body. There was talking about, punishing your body. Like, you ate chocolate, so you better work harder,
Yeah.
Right? And that didn't resonate for me. That didn't help me feel good in my body. So I really wanted to study movement and better understand how can we use it, not to help people look good. Yes, that is a benefit. It'll happen. You do so many burpees, you're going to look a different way. But how can we do the burpee in a way that empowers us, in a way that helps us feel strong and confident, helps us be like introspective and really notice, is this what I need right now? Like, how can we use the burpee to feel good, to teach ourselves about ourselves?
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear you say that because for me personally, and just like with the way I was raised in my family, fitness and sports has really been the answer to a lot of problems. In that, when I was a teenager and like angsty and upset about something, my dad would say, okay, let's park that for a minute. Let's go hit a ball. Let's go play tennis.
Yeah.
And if you're still upset about it, we'll talk about it. But,
Yeah.
Most of the time, just like getting that energy out. And when we were just talking about cardio before we started filming, that level of cardio, there is no room for worry or angst when you're working that hard. And then afterwards with the endorphins and what have you, you do feel a lot better. And maybe the problem is still there, but you're in a better mindset to tackle it.
Yeah, you've got clarity. I mean, what's happening to the body somatically when we move it vigorously, not like, lifting a weight, which is still important. But from a cardiovascular perspective, when we move our body vigorously, we're literally disrupting a synapse. So what you talked about, when you're ruminating over a problem and you can't solve it, you're probably in autopilot. You're probably, just thinking about it the same way as you've always thought it. But just putting on a good song and dancing around your kitchen can help you break that synapse, can get you out of autopilot, can get you out of your head into your body, can help you express energy, create space to see it differently, to look at it differently, not to mention the serotonin, the dopamine, the chemical cocktail you get from moving it, allowing you this new perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so valuable. And for our listeners who haven't been to SOAR, so first of all, I first heard about SOAR. How it happened was I was living in Etobicoke. I didn't grow up in Etobicoke, but I had moved there after I got married. And there's a magazine that circulates. It gets mailed to the house. I think it's like, is it called The Kingsway? And you were either on the cover or had like a very prominent spread in there. And I'm looking at the photo of you and I'm like, she looks so familiar. But, this is years since Blast Radius.
Yeah.
And then later on, I realized who you were. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like a very neat transition. And then a friend of mine brought me along to a class, and it was a SOAR and Surrender class. So I asked her beforehand, like, okay, what kind of class is this? Like, do I need sticky socks, bare feet, running shoes? Like, what am I doing? And she's like, anything goes.
Yeah.
Anything goes. Okay. So I thought I had signed up for like a Pilates class. And then I get there and it's like, I mean, I guess there's some Pilates movement incorporated, but it's like this joyous fusion of energetic movement. And what was most noticeable, though, apart from like the instruction itself, is first of all, those classes are booked. Like they are full, and not in a bad way. Like there's space, but there's so many women there and they're so on board, and there is this vibe that I haven't felt at very many gyms, and a real community feel. So I just wanted to ask you, like, how were you able to foster that?
That is such a great question. I get asked it a lot because what you're describing is community. And,
yes,
creating community, one, I would say the first thing is I did nothing. I mean, it is such a co-created space. I had an idea and I enrolled some friends who then enrolled friends, and it grew very organically. So I think that's, really important. It went from leading boot camps into my backyard to not having space for the women to renting out a room in a dance studio, and then having to add classes, and them being so busy with their own dance classes, having no availability for me. So thinking, okay, here's another tipping point. It looks like we'll have to open a space. So, but your question around community and how do you get a vibe like that is so important. And my answer, I think, is safety. And so I love what Brené Brown says about belonging. She says that, a lot of people strive to fit in. And in order to fit in, you have to change who you are. Belonging means however you arrive, all of your parts, they're welcome, they're accepted. You don't have to change any of them. You don't have to be anything different than who you are, this human, person being. And so that's really what we strive for, is creating a sense of safety so that people feel comfortable arriving in their bad day, in their good day, in their awful day, arriving on their mat and doing whatever they need. And knowing that if we're doing burpees and they're having a dance party, we're going to celebrate them. Knowing that if, we're in plank and they're in child's pose, we're going to still give them a high five. It's really understanding, and it comes from, the trainer expressing it. It comes from us sharing vulnerably. It comes with encouraging that vulnerability between members, where that safe container gives women an opportunity to land and be their whole selves, all of their parts. If they got angry at someone that week, that belongs. If they did something they regret, that belongs. If they're struggling, they let it show.
So you started in your backyard, then you were renting space in a dance studio, and then were you in your current location now on Dundas?
Yeah, we've been in the current location. It's 4,000 square feet. It's 2 studios for almost 6 years now, coming up in April. And if you do the math, I made this very difficult decision to go brick and mortar, which, if I had sent my business plan to banks, they all would have laughed me out the door. Like, it was not viable, but there was something in my heart that said, we're going to do this. And so I poured a lot of money into this physical space that was a Spanish banquet hall. Like, we took it down to the studs.
Oh, wow.
We rebuilt it.
You'd never know that now looking at it.
And so, and then we opened on April 6, 2020, 1 week after the pandemic shut gyms down.
Yeah. So then what? You went online?
We went online. We went on Zoom.
What a time to start.
What a time. You want to talk about victimhood. You want to talk about scarcity.
Yeah.
You want to talk about fear. I felt it all.
For sure. Understandable.
And if I hadn't just put so much money into the space, I probably would have run for the hills, bankrupt.
Yeah.
We got no government funding. We got no rent subsidy. We had to pay all of our bills, monthly bills, which were tremendous, without being able to open our doors. So online helped, but it was a fraction of what we needed, especially because we were so new. Fortunately, we've been doing the classes out of the dance studio, so people, we had a community
established. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's where, I hate the word pivot, but that's where I pivoted and I started offering corporate mindfulness programs virtually, which was my corporate background, knowing what type of stress people were under, my mindfulness training, knowing that we needed this now more than ever to be able to, focus on our mental health. And, even though those 2 years were so difficult, I think one of the biggest lessons I took away from it was the importance of asking for help. Leading up to that, I really had this kind of like, do it on your own, this stoic mentality of like, this is my burden to bear and I will bear it. And I realized very quickly with the help of the community that I did not have to do it alone, that there were so many helpers who wanted to be a part of this, who wanted to support, who wanted to help me get through these 2 years. And that's where the team, the co-creation, the ownership, not just from me, but everybody really started to come together.
No, that's an amazing story, particularly because I know so many businesses that didn't make it during that time, gyms that didn't make it. And even those that did try to pivot, it wasn't an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So many people associate movement, as you touched upon, with performance, aesthetics, fitness goals, and that's all well and good, but you seem to focus more on mindset, awareness, vulnerability, emotional education. How do you help your participants accept that shift? Or do you think they'd come to the studio already with a willingness to do that?
I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn is that everybody's on their own journey. And they are all coming into the studio for different needs. And so what we really try to do is we're like, here are some tools. Here are how these tools have helped me navigate this human experience a little bit more easily, and take what you need. Some of it'll fit and some of it won't. I went to my therapist once, I'll never forget it, like 8 years ago. And I said to her, she goes, "Why are you here?" And I said, I'm working so hard. I've got all the tools and I want to be happy all the time. Why aren't I happy all the time? And she looked at me and she said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." And I go, what am I paying for? What do you mean you can't help me? And she said, life is meant to be like a well-performing stock exchange. And I really believe this visual. I think it's so powerful. Hopefully there's an upward trajectory, well-performing stock exchange. So hopefully we're on this upward trajectory, but there's still going to be the highs and lows, the dips, the valleys, right? So her perspective is that, there'll still be some good days. And hopefully as you go on and you get equipped with these tools and you practice them and you strengthen them, those highs will be higher, but there still will be low days. And the hope is that, as you go through life equipping yourself, the low days aren't as low. So as we get tested in life with inevitable, shortcomings or challenges, we're resourced to be able to navigate them. We still feel the lows, but it's not as hard. And we still feel the highs, but they're higher. And so, when we have members land on their mat, it's not about checkmark workout. It's about, the first thing we do is we put our hands on our body for 2 minutes. We check in with our nervous system. We feel our feet on the ground. We slowly breathe into our body and we regulate before we move. And, believe it or not, that serves us in that moment. But for 2 minutes, we've just practiced regulating our nervous system with a very simple tool that you can do before you give a big presentation, that you can do before you have a hard conversation with a friend or a family member. So there's a tool, and then when we're in the plank and we're getting to the point where we want to stop, but all of a sudden we recognize that, we've intentionally created this discomfort. Let's normalize it. Let's not be afraid of it. Let's pull on some tools together, like remembering our breath, like saying an affirmation, this just feels hard because it's new. I can stay here. Remembering that the body is capable of so much more before the mind even realizes that we can keep going. So we're really kind of practicing that discomfort of life, applying the tools, strengthening the tools, and realizing that we're capable of so much more.
Is there a moment or story from someone within the community that you're able to share that really captures what this work is about to you?
There are so many. I can't imagine narrowing them down to just one. There's the father whose son has been an inpatient at Sick Kids for the last 40 days and still shows up to be able to take care of himself. There's the mother whose daughter is an outpatient at Sick Kids, and no matter what is happening, knows that she's welcome on her mat in any capacity, because if she doesn't put that proverbial mask on, right, then she won't be able to help her daughter do the same. There's, the woman who is younger than me and had a stroke. And once she was cleared to come back to movement after her stroke looked very different than before her stroke. And she had permission to show up very differently on her mat and move at a very different pace than all of us as she rewired her brains to move again. Right? So and I think that's the permission that we're trying to create, the safety that we're trying to create, that, the person who lost their father recently can show up on their mat and cry while we're in burpees. Right? So there are so many stories. And then there's also the stories of triumph, the birthday burpees that are being celebrated today for one of our trainers. And there's 60 people on the wait list because they just all want to be there to celebrate her. right? So there are so many stories. And I think what's so important is that those stories aren't hidden. We know them. The other day I was at my 6 a.m. class and I just had a moment where I looked around and it was 5:40 a.m. and half the class was already there and they were having their coffee and they were laughing and they were joking and they were commiserating. And I thought, it's not even about the workout. Why they leave this studio feeling so good is because of this right now. Like them showing up, sharing where they're struggling, where they're celebrating, showing their whole selves and feeling accepted, no one needing to fix them, no one needing to make it better for them. Just however you need to show up, it's enough.
Yeah, the shared experience, right, of life, not just what's happening in the studio.
Common humanity.
Yeah. As both a movement facilitator and a qualifying psychotherapist, how do you personally approach stress, discomfort, emotional challenge? I mean, obviously you've touched upon it, but beyond just moving your body.
Self-care is like, the last 2 and a bit years of my master's has been at the forefront of what they're teaching us. And the importance of, vicarious trauma and, somebody else's stress or discomfort living in our own, or this countertransference of feeling what our clients are feeling. And so really prioritizing self-care. And I think for me, self-care has changed a lot, like dramatically over the years. Before, it used to be this performative production where I went and got a facial or a massage, where, I went out for lunch with a friend, elaborate money, time, right? Still important. But what I'm realizing is self-care is making sure I only book 5 sessions a day, not 7, right? And even that I would say is too much, 4 to 5. Self-care is knowing that I've got a full week and deciding to stay in on a Friday night instead of going out. Or knowing that going out is just what I need and making sure I'm saying no to my full week, different areas. So self-care has become a little bit more like boundaries, I guess, and adhering to those boundaries and making sure that they're not rigid, but they're definitely prioritized. So healthy boundaries, I think, not self-care. I feel like that's a bit cliche, but healthy boundaries.
Speaking of attending events, you've expanded into retreats, immersive experiences, special events. What role do these deeper, longer format experiences play in the personal transformation of the attendees versus just a standard class?
I feel like there's a bit of a triangle when I think of the vision for SOAR. And, at the base of that triangle, there's movement. Movement is accessible. Movement is, something where people can just show up on their mat. They can do the work or they cannot. Even if they don't, quote unquote, do the work where they're aware of their patterns and they're aware of what they need in that moment and they're challenging themselves. If they just show up and do the burpee, they're still going to benefit. That dopamine, that serotonin that we talked about, that disruptor, that exhausting of the ego, that's just going to happen without any of the awareness, the work. And then I see on top of that, for anybody who feels like going a little bit deeper on their mat, I feel like there's this area, and that's the workshops, that's the retreats, that's Return to You, a 5-week program I do. And that's just about creating awareness of what are my limiting beliefs. When I land on my mat, now I can shake them out. Now I can draw awareness to where they, upon reflection, stop me this week and decide, it won't tonight, tomorrow, whatever. It's awareness of, where do I need to set stronger boundaries in my life? That self-reflection, that psychoeducation. Awareness. And then, if we feel really good there, then I think we can kind of go to the top and we can go to the psychotherapy. And, that I do believe is a little bit more challenging for a lot of people to access. It never ceases to amaze me. The very first session I have with someone, I'm so excited because I can't wait to hear their story. I can't wait to understand who they are and, play witness to how they became and what possibility is, waiting for them if we shift a little. And I'm always amazed that they show up and they're so nervous, not surprised, but constantly needing this reminder that this is really painful for people to show up and be seen, especially if they haven't been seen for a really long time or they haven't shared their whole self with someone. And that can be difficult. That can be challenging. And so, I understand that there's this progression that many of us need to get to, myself included, before we can kind of allow our whole selves that deep vulnerability, that exposure.
Speaking of the psychotherapy, you've authored 2 books, Return to You and Seeds of Wellbeing, which I'll be honest, I haven't picked them up yet, but I am interested in hearing more about those 2 books and just curious, how does writing fit into your routine? Because I imagine you're a pretty busy person with SOAR alone and all the things you do, a family and what have you. So when do you do this writing? How did it happen? What was the impetus for writing the 2 books?
So for me, writing has always been very therapeutic. The research required to go into it is how I stay relevant and current in my knowledge, helps me learn and grow, which is, I'm a seeker. Like, I just love growing. So that is very fulfilling for me.
So it's a natural part of your routine then?
Yeah. It's a way for me to share what I know. It's a way for me to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And it's a way for me to relate. Like, I think the stories in there are very true to my journey and how I've navigated it, and what's worked for me may not work for others. But I do feel like some people will read that and they'll see, just a part of themselves. My sobriety journey is in Seeds of Wellbeing. And, it's been 3 years now where I've chosen not to use alcohol as a crutch, as a way of managing my anxiety. And, it hasn't been easy. It's been very difficult. And I feel like I'm just now getting to that place where it feels easy. But I talk about that. I talk about the hurdles I had to overcome. I talk about, like that just one mentality that I'm faced with every time I'm out, drinking with others. And I think others who have these similar aspirations of, like, I understand that alcohol is not serving me. I understand that it doesn't feel good in my body. For some, it does. And for others, it can be very detrimental to their mental health. I just happen to be that person.
Fair enough. Where can we find your books?
In the studio and on Amazon.
Okay. So just to understand the full picture and succession of events, so you got certified in a number of movement practices, I'll call it.
Yeah.
And then you're a qualifying psychotherapist. You also have a nutrition background. How did that all come together?
Yeah. And I think that's this notion of what we do is to help people feel good. Like, that's really what we're trying to do. And you think back to those days in university where, movement, nutrition, therapy, mindfulness, they were all the levers that I was pulling, all of the tools that I was practicing and strengthening in order to feel good. And so I started incorporating those into SOAR's offering. And, it's so funny, is the last couple of years, 2.5 years ago, I kept hearing myself say to people, if I could do it all over again, I would have become a psychotherapist. I have this passion of psychology and neuroplasticity and how our brains work and how we can support ourselves to just feel better. It's been such a huge part of my own personal journey in mental health. And then I thought, wait a minute. Why do I have to be 20 to be educated or think about going to school? So just over 2.5 years ago, I went back to do my master's of psychology. And then now I feel like the psychotherapy aspect of it kind of is now providing this well-rounded offering. SOAR is just so much more than a fitness class. It can be that. But really my hope is, like, those tools that I needed then, those tools that have helped me feel better in my body and my experience, navigate this very difficult human experience better. I feel like I want to be able to provide those to others. And I believe that we're finally there. We're really getting there.
So, sorry, just to be clear, so you offer through SOAR, obviously, the fitness, but you also offer therapy as well? Okay. I didn't know this, actually.
Yeah. So I'm currently in my practicum under supervision. So since September, I've logged over 200 hours of psychotherapy, which has been amazing. It has been like, you talk about the pinnacle. Like, I thought Nike was the pinnacle of my career. Like, it just goes to show you, I'm 45 and I'm still learning and still growing. And I think one of the biggest things I take away from this career, from SOAR, from what it offers, I used to think our career had to be corporate ladder. I came from two very successful parents who worked very successful corporate jobs. I did not have exposure to entrepreneurship. And so I learned that there's a rung and you have to do certain things to reach for it. And so I was doing that for the first 15 years of my career. And what I'm learning is our careers are more like scaffolding. And so I think of like my business degree. I think of my sales experience at Pepsi, even though I was in marketing. I think of my creative experience at Nike. I think about this movement, journey I've been on, and then, the mindfulness and the psychotherapy. And it really is this scaffolding that if you had asked me, 25 years ago, where will you be? It would not have been here. It's a bit of this surrender, a bit of this trust, a bit of this just like, there is not a rung you're trying to reach for. There is simply this scaffolding that you are accessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's so true. You don't always know where you're going to end up.
Oh,
but
I hope not.
Guess just the forward trajectory is the key thing.
Yeah, and being willing to be a beginner again. I think that's pretty critical too. A lot of us, and I'll speak us 40s, we have all of this critical experience and we think, okay, this is it. This is just what I'm going to do. And I'm just such a believer that, I don't want to retire. I don't want to have any Freedom 50 plan. I want to contribute to the world. I want to, continue to grow and learn. And that means I have to be willing to be a beginner.
Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, you might not be able to necessarily answer this question, but looking ahead, obviously you have goals and vision for SOAR. So what do those look like, particularly in the world we live in that is so digital and disconnected from the body?
That's a great question. And I will answer honestly, I don't know. So many people ask us, are you going to open up more locations? And so many people ask us, like, what's next for SOAR? And, while I have that kind of pyramid vision, my desire has just always been to do it better. And I feel like in doing it better, the growth naturally shows itself. So whether that is multiple locations, whether that is more of a sanctuary, a place where you can land and get access to all of those things, whether it simply is how it exists today and we can continue to fulfill the needs of our members who walk through. We have 10,000 visits a month, right? So to know that, to hope that you're making an impact on, those humans that are walking through your door and making a bit of a difference, that is kind of the ultimate goal.
Awesome. That's a great answer. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's been great to reconnect with you after all these years. Yes. But for our listeners, please tell them where they can find SOAR and digitally and...
Yeah, so SOAR is spelled SAOR.
Yes.
So SOAR, that's the Gaelic term. The translation is really to be free. And so we took the spelling of the Gaelic, we're not pronouncing it right. Mm-hmm. But we do take the spelling of the Gaelic, meaning to be free, which is SOAR. And then you can find us at SOAR.com. You can find us on Instagram at SOAR_studio. Myself, Nathania_Harrison. And yeah, we're at Jane and Dundas in the West End of Toronto.
Yes, I'll be there next week.
Amazing.
All right.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.